All right, I am now joined, as always, by our producer Forrest, by Ryan Lake, who you can see there orbiting Clendathu, by Jacobin deputy editor Micah Uetricht. We're also joined by our graphic designer, the guy who makes all those awesome thumbnails for the streams and episodes, J. Andrew World, and finally by Daniel Bessner, who is a historian, Jacobin contributing editor, foreign policy guy, Quincy Institute fellow. Basically, he would be the person who's being yelled at on the TV show in Starship Troopers because he thinks that there might be some smarter bugs that are making the decisions.
Yes, if only.
Frankly, I find the idea of a smart bug offensive.
What a movie, folks.
It's Tucker Carlson's great or future grandchild, I guess, like a few centuries in the future.
Oh yeah, no, the guy was saying he finds the thought of a smart bug offensive. Like, I had that thought while I was watching it. It looks like not like Tucker Carlson now, doing his dime store Father Coughlin impression, but like Tucker Carlson 10 or 20 years ago, when he was the perfect embodiment of that kind of conservative that
it's MSNBC. It's MSNBC Tucker Carlson. When he had before he got hired by
Fire Line Tucker Carlson.
Crossfire Tucker Carlson.
Crossfire. It's the in the Chapo book, they have these this taxonomy of different kinds of conservatives, and one of them is the bow tie dipshit, and that was old Tucker Carlson to a T.
Mm-hmm. I miss that Tucker Carlson.
I remember Sam Cedar cosplaying as him. When they started up the Majority Report with Jeanine Garofalo, he'd wear the bow tie.
Oh, that is a
Jeanine Garofalo was the original Majority Report?
Yeah. The original Majority Report was Sam Cedar and Jeanine Garofalo.
Well, on Air America
Radio.
Right? Yeah.
And Sam Cedar would wear a bow tie just to confuse everybody that he was Tucker Carlson.
Why did Jeanine leave?
There was something to do with the GMO controversy. She was against GMOs.
That sounds right.
And so Air America didn't want to air pseudoscientific. They felt anti-GMO stuff. So she ended up leaving. She didn't get fired. I don't think she left. But
this is a fault line
on that show.
Hmm?
Wasn't Mark Maron on Air America or my?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Maron was Air America. Al Franken, Rachel Maddow,
Tom Hartman.
Yep, Tom Hartman. Sure. What were you saying, Micah?
Well, just this rift between embracing science and embracing the pseudoscience, sort of anti-scientific, anti-modernist stuff. That's a constant problem on the left, one that we have not rid ourselves of at this point. We still deal with these debates.
Mm-hmm.
Well, liberals were super anti-GMO and super anti-vax, a lot of the time in the early 2000s. I mean, which for solid reasons at some point, because obviously they had the mercury in some of the vaccines that later got taken out of it. But I remember even as a kid, my mom my mom was part of all of those farmers co-ops and stuff, and that was big in those things. And they're more conservative people would never set foot anywhere near those farmers co-ops. That was a purely liberal left.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you go back and look at the things that Obama and Hillary were saying in 2008, they were both they both made some sort of winking at the anti-vax, anti-vax sentiments comments. It came up on the campaign trail just because it was a constituency that in 2008 you still had to cater to somewhat, in the Democratic primary voters, which
the Montessori constituency.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, proto-Q stuff.
Yeah, no. Well, a lot of those things have the partisan valence has changed in weird ways, right? We were talking about Air America, and I think a comment I've seen a couple of people who are Air America call screeners, around the time of the 2004 election make is how hilarious they find it now to see all of the conspiracy theories that they were always shutting down callers for believing about the voting machines, how those have all become conservative conspiracy theories now.
Yeah,
Well, it's whoever loses. It's whoever loses in power, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, people love to I guess take their ball and go home once they.
The funny thing is the Brad blog, which is still around. It was actually a lot of the Q stuff was taken straight off of like really old Brad blog stuff when he was reporting on voting machines back then.
Who's Brad blog?
Brad Friedman, he's a guy out in California. He does actually pretty good reporting now. But he was doing a lot of that. Although now he's kind of a liberal too. He does actually really good reporting on like voting conditions in like new laws getting passed and whatnot. So like if you want to keep up with that kind of stuff, he's actually a pretty good follow for that. But he's always like, you know, quoting Rachel Maddow and I forget that what was it, Bill Maher.
Oh, Bill Maher. I missed that whole first 10 years of blogging, thank God. But it seems like we're back now. It seems like the blogging wars of the 2000s are back with a vengeance. I'm very interested to see how Substack shakes out. Have you guys heard about Substack?
Yeah.
Substack is destroying journalism, right?
That's what I hear.
They need editors. They need managers over there.
Yeah.
What about the PMC?
I mean-
Will somebody think of the PMC?
Yeah, think of the PMC like me. I need employment here. I'm an editor. Stop trying to take my job. They're taking my jobs.
Well, they don't need editors to be good editors over there. The thing is they need editors to censor. You know, I mean that's kind of the liberal PMC line. Like they need editors to censor what can actually go on there. You know what I mean? Like it's less about like good quality writing, I think, for them, and a lot of times, and more about like what can be said and not said, and the flack.
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? I mean, I think there are, like, I mean, I'm sure there is some quality slide. I mean, like the biggest name Substack people, you know, probably have like, you know, I'm sure they have people fulfilling many of the functional roles that an editor would fulfill. But also, I mean, you can just dump anything on there, and you know, so there is going to be some, you know, there is going to be some quality slide. Although, like, I would argue that in some of the cases where people ended up migrating there, the issues that they had with, you know, with editors were more about content than you know, than prose.
But you don't hear them complaining about Medium. I mean, and
Yeah.
it's you know what I
Well,
mean?
yeah, because they're not complaining about Medium because nobody makes any money from Medium.
Yeah.
That's really, I think that's really the issue.
I do find that the Substack stuff is overwritten. I have noticed that, generally speaking. It's usually, I'd say, between 25 to 30% longer than it needs to be.
What do you think my job is, man?
I know.
That's
Exactly.
what-
So there's like a lot of that, and that's you need an editor. Everyone needs an editor.
It's true.
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean, sure, editors are good. I think that I'm not. I wouldn't deny that.
so why are we all jumping on Micah here? Why are we all lose his job?
I mean, editors for quality are great. Editors for you know, I guess subject matter and content in the way that some like PMC journalists are complaining about Substack aren't, I'd say.
Well, yeah.
It's
So
forced
that's the thing. Oftentimes, the complaint seems to be less that it's unedited than that like people they don't want to be writing, you know,
Yeah.
for it.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I, as a fan of some of the people we're probably talking about, it's overwritten. Definitely, I noticed that. I'm like 4/5 of the way through. I'm like, it's a little long.
Well, it's unshackled. It's unshackled writing. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of celebrating the fact that no one's telling them what to write, which you know can't go on forever. I don't think if you want to have quality writing.
This is the thing. None of these can go on forever, whether it's adjuncting in academia or Substack. So what? I just want the collapse to come already. I've been like waiting for so long. I just want us to go over the cliff.
I mean, the first draft of everything that I said, Jacobin, is like 500 words of all work and no play, make Jack a dull boy over and over again, and you know, and then I kind of get out of business. So
Hey,
you know,
1 week too early, Ben. That reference.
You certainly don't want to see that unedited, but
Is
but
that
of
all
course-
it takes to get in Jacobin? All right.
as you say, well, no, I mean, I got into, I got into to Jacobin because Micah's my third cousin, so
Micah, you're Jewish?
That explains a lot. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you know the answer to that question.
Oh, I have such a good. Okay, I'm gonna leave it on that.
Ultra goy over here.
Yeah.
Happy Passover, everyone. Half of Ben. Is that it? Is that it? Wow. This is disappointing. What has become of the left?
Yeah,
I think 23andMe said I might be like 0.1%. So
23andMe put me at 99.7%.
Back when I was in 6th grade, I was taking a Taekwondo class, and I ended up becoming friends with her kids, and but I did. This woman was in my class, and she thought I was Jewish. So while we're sparring, she'd always be like trying to flash her her Star David at me, and I thought it was like she was practicing me some kind of vampire hunter. They're using Jewish symbols to freeze the vampires.
That's the opposite way that I thought the story was going to go.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I was going to make a shiny joke and transition to Starship Troopers from there, but now I just have to try to do something. I mean, I guess the way to do this would have been to do a joke about anti-Semitism and Nazis and get Starship Troopers from there. But
is there some connection?
I thought this was just a movie about fighting bugs.
Yeah, this is just some plucky young high school kids fighting bugs, right?
Yeah, there's no politics in this movie.
There's that Lincoln Film Center thing that I was listening to Verhoeven. His description of Starship Troopers was really amazing. I texted it to you, Ben, but it was like he was like, well, the main narrative. I'm not going to try to do a Dutch accent or whatever, but he was like, the main narrative is a bunch of young boys and girls just fighting bugs. But he's like, there's the second counter narrative where we're like, they're all fascist. They're all a little bit fascist. And he said it so casually.
Yeah, so Robert Heinlein, who wrote the original novel, was I think he actually started out as a socialist back in like the 30s, but certainly by the time he wrote this novel, he'd long since drifted to the right. And
it kind of started after World War II.
Yeah,
I was a Heinlein nerd as a kid. I grew up literally like the stories before bedtime. My dad would read to me would be Heinlein books. So.
All right.
I was weaned off the teeth of Heinlein.
That's amazing.
Okay. So Heinlein, he also, and actually even his later books, I mean, I think at least superficially are a little politically all over the place, because there's also Stranger to Strange Land, which was, much beloved by many people in the counterculture, in the late 60s, early 70s. Supposedly Charles Manson's favorite novel, although I'm told that might not be true.
It was his free love book.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait a minute, I didn't realize it was the same guy, because I just read Chaos, and that book makes an appearance in Chaos as like a theory about where Charles Manson's whole MO came from. And this is the same author. I didn't realize.
Yep, same author. Yep.
Wow.
And he also wrote The Mood is a Harsh Mistress, which is kind of a libertarian thing. Although
his books kind of were libertarian.
Yeah, sort of. Although Starship Troopers, the least obviously, right? Because it's so basically the first chapter. This might be an exaggeration. It's been many years since I read it, but my memory of it is like a little bit at the beginning of the novel, like a chapter or two, and a little bit at the end are like action heavy sort of military science fiction that's fun in very much the way that a lot of the movie is fun. But in between, like the great bulk of the novel is like the history and moral philosophy classes they're teaching to indoctrinate, recruits. And so it's like basically like 2/3 of the book is like sort of the political theory behind all of this.
Like Plato, right?
Like that classroom scene, the high school classroom scene.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of it's like the high school classroom scene, except of course,
all authority is derived from force.
The line in the classroom scene is taken out of the book. The thing about Hiroshima, That, you know, my mother says violence doesn't solve anything. Why don't you ask the city fathers of Hiroshima about that? Violence has solved more questions than any other in human history. But like, so the content of, you know, the way the society basically works, some of the specific things they say in class are all, you know, lifted straight from the book. But what Verhoeven is doing is like finding a lot of ways throughout the movie to not very subtly suggest that this is all incredibly disturbing and fascist, you know, whereas, you know, Heinlein, you know, I mean, it's a, you know, like Heinlein, it's not a, you know, that's not a resonance, you know, he intended, but I think Verhoeven is correct, you know, to find it there. That's true. They did have the
yeah. I mean, and Verhoeven, of course, has his own personal experience of Nazism, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. No, his first. I think he was. I was listening to that talk, and he was talking about how I think when the war ended, he was 7, so it was like very much within, you know, a time that he would remember, and he was talking about his formative years and how kind of like bombs raining down at different times and like the capture of just his like city by the Nazis, like, and, you know, the government collaborating with them kind of shaped his world. And he compared it, which is really interesting in this talk, to like Syria, like how people kind of in Syria now would see like this constant chaos and like bombing and violence as like kind of a normal state of being, even if you're kind of in a community that is collaborating with the, you know, like with the US or with another government that's, you know, causing this to happen. Like it still captures your formative experience to be part of like this war, I guess, backdrop in a way that, you know, that whether it's England or here, you wouldn't have.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Someone should do an article comparing like Verhoeven and Polanski, or sort of like people who were children during the Holocaust who then made it basically the central question of their entire oeuvre. And I think obviously with Verhoeven, fascism just comes up again and again and again and again throughout his entire filmography. And it's really interesting. And he's probably one of the best. I mean, I think this is one of the best movies about fascism and American empire ever made. And it's kind of funny how like it comes during this end of history moment, but I guess it makes sense, right? Like it seems that there's no other alternative, and he basically created a movie about what would happen if the American empire just continued unchallenged, essentially forever. Everyone's speaking English, even though it's in Buenos Aires, and they have Spanish origin names. Yeah, Juan Rico, of course, and
it's one world. It's a one world government. Like
it's a one world government.
Yeah,
speaking English, implying that. Which nation state won the one world? All of the sky marshals speak English. They actually all seem to be American. They all have American accents. And I don't think that is necessarily a mistake. It's implied to me that they're colonized, essentially, that the United States colonized Argentina and colonized the rest of the world. And it's a really excellent portrayal of the deep connections between actual fascist potential and American empire. And I'm curious why so many people missed that at the time. It's so obviously satirical.
Yeah,
it's so obvious. He like bangs you on the head, and people take it as like so seriously.
I mean, the big thing is. Oh, I'm sorry, Micah. Go ahead.
This is true of multiple Verhoeven movies. I mean, it's true if you read the old reviews of Starship Troopers. It's true if you read the old reviews of Showgirls, which I think is a fucking fantastic movie. And all the reviews are just like, oh, it's just drenched in sex. I'm like, in Showgirls, there are boobs on screen more often than there are not boobs on screen, and it is the least sexy movie I have ever seen in my entire life. How are you people missing what this movie is trying to do? It's true across the board. It's just like, I remember when I watched Starship Troopers for the first time a couple of years ago, and then I read the reviews from the time that it came out. I like, not that I had a high amount of faith in like the critics of American pop culture to begin with, but I was just like, okay, you guys are just fucking morons. Like, you cannot be trusted with this real estate in the New York Times or wherever, because you are so fucking dumb that you didn't pick up what Verhoeven is doing. It's not subtle in this movie. He's banging you over the head with it, and they're just like, oh, it's a fun, a fun splatter movie, but it doesn't later. And no.
It's like they couldn't even see the critique of liberalism, and in some sense, Verhoeven's entire career is an extended critique of liberal ideology. And I think that must have a lot to do with it. It's like they can't even see it. It's outside of their vision. I mean, RoboCop, Showgirls, Starship Troopers, these are all criticisms of liberalism, ultimately, and they can't see it. It's very interesting, actually. Again,
it's especially interesting with this movie because I was looking back. Some of the reviewers who understood RoboCop, like Roger Ebert is a great example. He praised RoboCop as a brilliant satire, and then he just totally panned Starship Troopers. Just said it was a stupid, pointless action movie. So, like, even people who understood other Verhoeven movies did not get this one. It's kind of amazing.
RoboCop was happening in front of them, like you know what I mean, like the privatization of the 80s was kind of happening in front of their faces, and that, I guess, that political theme isn't necessarily lost on people, but you know, it's very interesting, like the lead up to our conflicts in the Middle East, the lead up to America kind of becoming this I mean, always an overt empire, but now kind of, you know, this moment where people were like ready to go to war. People were kind of following in the I don't know, in the mood, I guess, that Starship Troopers is trying to lampoon. But like it's before that, so I guess not being able to see that moment. But it's interesting who apparently didn't get the movie but liked the movie, like the Clinton administration, like Bill Clinton really liked it. And there's the story. There's also the story that Casper Van Dam was telling, where he was on a plane and some guy was talking to him about Starship Troopers while he was reading a script, and he didn't look and see who it was. He looked over and it was Karl Rove telling him how much he liked.
Well, yeah, so there's a line. This is not the best movie that I'll ever reference on one of these streams, but I don't know if you guys ever watched Harold and Kumar Escape from Guantanamo Bay. It's the sequel, of course, to Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. And in that movie, there's this guy who's the like NatSec official who's like hounding them throughout the movie because due to comical misunderstandings, he thinks they're terrorists, and he's like this parody of like the sort of worst of Bushism, and there's a point where Neil Patrick Harris has roles in both of the Harold and Kumar movies playing himself. He runs into Neil Patrick Harris, and he starts telling him in this very earnest way, making it clear that he doesn't see any parody there, how much Starship Troopers and Neil Patrick Harris's role in Starship Troopers meant to him.
Yeah.
That was Rob Corddry, right?
Yeah, Rob Corddry. Yep.
Very nice guy. I met him once. Super nice guy. He should write something for Jacobin. But yeah, I wonder if this had been made like just like 5 years later, right? So it was 1997, and if it had been like 2002, if some of what you're talking about, Ryan, and the critical reaction wouldn't have happened that way, because like there are like, especially there's this like some of this, I think, had it been post 9/11, would have felt like just painfully obvious. Like there's the scene, of course, we were referencing earlier with the two pundits, where the Tucker Carlson dipshit is like getting upset that the other pundit is suggested that there might be intelligent bugs. And especially the scene where the reporters are in, I guess it's still boot camp at that point, or maybe they've just gone into the infantry. But like right after, the war is broken out, it says some people say that, if humans hadn't intruded into the bugs, habitat, that this none of this would have happened. And there's a live and let live. And then they start screaming at him, I'm from Buenos Aires. I say kill them all.
Yeah. The only good bug is a dead bug.
I mean, that's also happening in 2001, or after that, would it have gotten lost, the satire? And I'll let Mike go. I'm just saying, like, would the satire have gotten lost at that point?
I mean, what's so incredible about it, I'm just repeating things other people are saying, I guess, but like that he picked up that this was like a latent mood. Like it wasn't explicit in America in the 90s, but it was like with the end of history, people were ready to enter into the mood that he depicts in the movie, and that they would then enter into 4, 5, 6 years later after 9/11. I mean, that's astonishing. Like that's what an incredible accomplishment that he was able to like to feel that. And again, as you know, he'd been in the US for a long time, but you know, a guy from the Netherlands, like just being able to understand that, like that was it's different, as you said, from what was going on with like RoboCop, because like what happens in RoboCop is literally happening on the streets of America, but like Starship Troopers is prescient in this way. It's sort of sensing what is to come. Astonishing.
Yeah, it's extremely perceptive. It does feel like this movie, maybe more than the others, is kind of a practical joke on Americans. It's like, I bet I can get you guys to cheer for the fucking Nazis. Let's go. And like,
yeah, and he doesn't even make. I mean, basically at the end, Doogie is dressed like Himmler.
Yeah, I mean, it's not subtle at all.
He literally,
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, Neil Patrick Harris is literally wearing an SS uniform.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the moment of like, all right, people might actually lose the satire in this. Let's try to make it so painfully obvious that like nobody could possibly miss this.
Yeah, I also got a big kick out of whenever they talked about the soldier, the veterans uprising camp, just like imagining the dumb coup back in January of like that's how this society came about as a result to
that was like the successful version of the January 6th riot.
Yeah, like
what that would have ended up looking like.
Well, actually, and Verhoeven knew, unlike the people who were so worried that the Republic was about to be overthrown, Verhoeven knew it had to be soldiers.
Right.
It's a soldier uprising. It's a militaristic society.
Right. Because it's like all the stuff that's like my favorite thing. Like my favorite thing about January 6th that turned out to be bullshit, which self-criticism I completely bought at the time, was it looked like there was a component where at least some people there were planning on kidnapping people because there was that guy with zip ties, and it turned out later, I mean, that charge was completely withdrawn. Turned out that the guy with the zip ties was a bartender who was there with his mom. A cop had dropped some zip ties, and he'd like pick them up. He has picture taken, and so it's like, yeah, these people know they're not gonna overthrow the Republic. That's not happening.
So can everyone agree that I was just 100% right about literally everything I said in the past 6 months? We all agree. Is that consensus here?
about every subject, or just this one?
Pretty much. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I co-wrote the article with you about that, so I'm willing to concede that.
We were right, Ben.
What's that?
We were right.
There we go. But yes, the Verhoeven, the highlight Verhoeven, version makes a lot more sense than that, since they were at least ex-soldiers. But in any case, and should say just to kind of briefly review, I think the sort of more granular details of the plot of this don't need to be gone through in quite the same way we do with some other movies, but
I actually have a question about that, just for you guys. Like the romances in this movie are like nothing, kind of, do you think that's by design? It's just because they really aren't that great actors? I think both. I
think both. I think both. But I also think that the romance, the first one, is more fetishization than anything. You know what I mean? Like he's pining for Denise Richards in a way that she clearly isn't, pining for him in any sense. And it turns
that way too. Dizzy pining for him is exactly the same thing. Yeah.
But they turn that into nationalistic or globalistic fervor in that sense, because they're willing to like join the army because of this image of somebody that they're romanticizing and like pining for. So they're like following this person into combat in that sense, and it's like mixed up with like I don't want to call it patriotic, but maybe I guess patriotic fervor, like this nationalistic sense of duty, I guess.
Okay, that makes sense. When you started talking about globalism, I thought that I thought that was some sort of slam against Daniel, but
well, it's globalism because it's the one it's the one world government.
Important global holiday for us. Come on,
it's a new world order and a one world government. Yeah,
it's all coded.
There were some echoes of Bush also, like with the New World Order stuff, which was this big thing in 1991, right after the Cold War. Right after the Cold War and right after the Gulf War.
So the order that the veterans uprising led to is one where there are a few hints of like that some of this stuff is not just in the military, that like this is also how domestic law enforcement works. Johnny's father has a throwaway line about how like I'd rather have 10 lashes in the public square than, right, suggested that they have corporal punishment just as part of the regular legal system, you know, like Singapore.
Also, the guy's sentenced to death without a trial. I mean, really.
Well, they gave him a trial. It's just
like barely,
captured, put on trial, and executed on the same day.
Yeah.
So, you know, probably not a good trial.
And then everybody claps.
Really, right?
There's applause. Right.
Well, all right, not a I don't know, not like an like it's a trial where he's expected to be guilty. You know what I mean? Like it's not like
you get the impression this is some sort of very perfunctory kind of tribunal, you know, that like processes him and sentences him to death right there and then.
The other thing that I think really was foresight is that Verhoeven said that they got the idea for that scene from Bush's Bush, you know, like Bush Jr. his Texas. Like they said that reading articles about Texas was where they got the idea for like the one single day trial.
Oh wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So yeah, it's so you have this like the domestic legal system has gotten much more fascisty, you know, and I guess the and the military legal system, you know, is clearly like much more so than what currently exists. Like there's a throwaway reference at the end of the movie to how going off mission, like if he goes down to like explore one part of the cave, takes people down there when the mission was to go into the other part of the cave, that, you know, he'd get the death penalty for that. But the main thing is that you can't vote unless you've served in the military. That, you know, that you can only be a citizen if you're a veteran. So which is the big pressure for everybody to join the military.
You also can't have kids without a license, which is hard to get a license if you're not like an upper class or an upper middle class person without serving.
Wait, I completely missed this. When did this come up?
She says in the shower scene, she says, "I want to have babies, and the government won't give me a license. They're much more likely to give me a license."
Okay.
And then she dies. That character is the first one to die. Death of motherhood.
Fair enough.
It's deep.
You're welcome.
There's also the guy that says, I can't afford Harvard. It's going to cost me an arm and a leg, and he gets his arm and leg ripped off before he dies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, right, subtle. So then there's a conflict with the bugs, who are like, it's a little ambiguous for much of the movie how like intelligent they are exactly, but they do you know, they do things like they the way that they attack humans is by like sending asteroids to hit, you know, spaceships or to hit Buenos Aires, you know.
Do you think they actually sent? I mean, because we're never actually shown evidence that they can send asteroids. Like they can shoot plasma into space, but like, I mean, what are the odds? I mean, it would take like some really precise measurements to actually blast an asteroid so that it flies across the galaxy.
So you think these are just asteroid strikes that they're blaming on the bugs?
They have to, like,
yes, I think an asteroid hit Earth, and they were like, the bugs did it. Let's go get them. It's like it was like a preview of the Iraq War. This is how prescient Verhoeven is.
You also don't know. I mean, this is kind of, it's putting it on historical record. You know what I mean? Like this movie kind of is propagandistic. Like I don't think that what you're supposed to be watching in the movie is necessarily what's going on in the present moment. It's like kind of a story about how they got to the present moment. So you don't know how much of what you're ever really seeing is honest.
Yeah. I also see a brain bug at the beginning, which, you know, has the vagina face and gets penetrated. They censor that. And then, like, you know, but then the whole end of the movie is, you know, we got to capture, these brain bugs don't actually exist. And then they capture one. So, you know, question is, did they know all along, or was this out of order, like in some weird Tarantino thing, or, you know, it misuses
the first part of the movie was
the
completely out of order. So, like I don't remember if the scene you're talking about was in this, but they the very first part of the movie was explicitly out of order. They did the 3 years earlier.
Yeah, but the thing is though, is like even the scene that was shown at the very beginning was like the first mission. It wasn't it was actually a pull from the book, where the book kind of starts off with a with that straight up action scene, and then jumps earlier to high school, where this one explicitly says, I think 1 year earlier, if I remember correctly, and then there's a whole bunch of the movie that goes on afterwards. So
there's also a question about how much of the I think it fits very nicely with what you're saying about how like a lot of this is like the sort of, because it's all mixed up. It's he's doing the RoboCop thing and showing you like little snatches of TV, right? But if to the extent that what you're seeing is like a government propaganda narrative, then there's also a real question about the extent to which humans are actually winning this war. Since on the one hand it's portrayed like they are, but on the other hand, the attrition is insane. I mean, like at the end of the movie, all the people with these really high military ranks are the people who were in high school 3 years earlier, because like everybody above them was just killed in this constant slaughter. So it's like, I don't know, are they winning? It kind of doesn't seem like
it's not clear. I mean, the whole thing at the end when the Neil Patrick Harris character is like, we've got it now, we're gonna get the bug, then we'll understand them, then we'll win, like this is the turning point. And it's like, that doesn't seem very you're assuming a lot about what you're gonna get from this one brain bug.
It's the like Seinfeld yada 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 thing. It's like we get the brain bug, yada yada yada, we win the war. But I mean, assumably the war is still happening. Like, assumably when you're watching this, the war is still going on, and you're being shown military propaganda to get you hyped up to join.
And I'm not sure either where it is in the chronology, or I mean, it's kind of treated as a joke, so maybe they're not really doing this. But there was the scene where they suggested like that they were resorting to actual child soldiers.
They stopped laughing at the end when the kid's like, "We're gonna do this," and
in the book, I seem to recall them not doing that well in the war, but I haven't read it in a long time. But I think they're kind of losing in the book, aren't they?
Well, they're fighting
maybe. I'm actually not clear about that in my memory. Tyler, thank you for the super chat, and also for the reminder that this movie did have space Mormons in it. There was the Mormon colony.
They're all slaughtered. They're all wiped out when they.
The government refers to them as Mormon extremists in the news.
I bet that the government killed them and blamed that on the bugs too. Guaranteed.
False flag. What was the name of the camp? Was it Brigham Young?
It was like
Joe Smith. Yeah, Joe something.
Joe Smith.
Yeah, Joseph Smith. I think. Yeah. But
or maybe it was Joey Smith.
But I do think. But to answer your question from earlier, Daniel, I do tend to think that it was on purpose that the romantic plots were so bad, because I think you were supposed to feel uncomfortable with those,
right?
I mean, especially like when when he does finally hook up with with Dez, I guess was the character's name, at the end of the movie. There's like literally dialogue. It's like. Like they're about to get it on. He says, "Oh, I got to be at this meeting in 10 minutes." And then he sees her in the best. Make that 20, right? It's like, so you have 10 minutes to do this and you get out, like that's
that's combat, baby.
Romantic as any of this was supposed to seem.
Yeah. That's the culmination of their big romance.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like the cast is like ripped from those kind of TV shows that were full of just bad romance like that anyways. So it's kind of like making fun of the actors in a way too. Because I mean, they could have been on Saved by the Bell, or I think they were on like 90210 and Melrose Place and those kind of teen shows. That were around at the
only
time.
Got them from that and from soap operas.
Yeah, so like it kind of was like almost like mocking the actors in a way, to make it even more satirical.
Yeah.
You have to wonder, what was Denise Richards thinking when it was being filmed. I mean, like, so much of the way it's shot seems almost like a joke about how bad of an actor Denise Richards is. I mean, they're all pretty bad actors.
Yeah.
But it's like, I just remember being particularly
Except for
struck
Michael
by
Ironsides, he's great.
Yeah.
Oh, and Clancy Brown. Don't forget the Kurgan.
Oh, Clancy Brown, of course. The Kurgan, yes, the Kurgan was fantastic.
And you know what? Like he's not good in the movie, but he ended up having a good career. The one guy that was in the Roughnecks that ended up getting injured and blew up the bomb at the end.
The guy from
he
The
was
Wire.
in The Wire.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He's also in Walking Dead.
He's in Walking Dead. Yeah, that's right.
I can never take him
But
seriously.
like he's actually good.
I watched The Wire after watching Walking Dead. So when he's always like getting ready for like violence against people on the streets of Baltimore, I'm like, you're not doing that. You're like you're the peaceful priest guy from Walking Dead. Calm down.
That's great.
Yeah. So, and I guess also, I mean, I think one thing that you do have to give the movie, like, is that I like, it's a neat trick. Like I think what was it, either Ryan or Daniel, I don't remember, was saying earlier about the like feeling like a practical joke, right? Let's see if we can get into a root for Nazis. So it's like a way I was thinking about it, because I was thinking about Inglourious Bastards, because I always like thought that was like a clever thing, because although it's not as hard as what Verhoeven is doing here, because what Tarantino is doing in Inglourious Bastards is saying, okay, you'll root for absolutely anything if it's being done to Nazis, right? Mm-hmm. So like let's play with how far we could possibly take that, right? Like how vicious and depraved we can make people who are attacking Nazis, and you'll still cheer for it. And there's a lot of stuff in that movie that's like ways that that like different Nazi characters are actually kind of like refined and admirable, and the and then the Americans are like serial killers, but you're still rooting for it, and then of course they're really playing with that in the scene where you have the movie within the movie, and it's just guys getting shot and everybody thinks it's hilarious. But this one is a step more ambitious than that, right? Because it's not even like, how far can we get you to at least play on like our sort of deepest civic religion, Nazis are bad, right? But how much can we get you to actually go in the opposite direction from that and say like, and have people who are being explicitly compared to Nazis. There's, again, there's Neil Patrick Harris in his SS uniform. There's a line where the dude from the fleet says someday, like his parting line before he's killed by the brain bug is, someday somebody like me is going to exterminate your race. Mm-hmm.
Xander.
And then, but then but like also, so even though they're being not explicit, that heavy hand, and of course the imagery, right? The iconography is very, very Nazi-like.
Yeah, that's that too. Yeah, all the little symbols on the newsreels and everything. It's just like straight up Nazi symbols. It's just
yeah, but
the rhetoric in the classroom, like all authority is derived from force. Like,
yeah. I like when he says that. He says that, and then he says, like, therefore, voting is a form. He somehow is like, even voting is a form of violence.
Yeah. Well, that's explicit, which I guess was where we tie back into Heinlein's libertarianism. Because it's like, oh, see, you're making decisions about, you're interfering with people's property rights and stuff. It's violence. It's all the same. But
I am very intelligent.
Yeah, exactly. But despite all the heavy-handed Nazi stuff, like, you're still sucked into rooting for these people in these like weird, simplistic, like sort of personal stories about them trying to like rise through the ranks of this god-awful evil system and like win glory for the fatherland, and all of that stuff. Like, to the point that, like, this isn't the first time I've watched this. Everything that we've just been saying, I knew about the movie before I watched it this last time. But like watching it last night, it's like I enjoyed the hell out of it. And like part of that was enjoying the satire. But like part of that was just the way a lot of the movie is supposed to function. It's just on this kind of visceral level. You know, it's fun to watch in a way that sort of appeals to you know, everybody's inner stormtrooper, I guess. You know, and
well,
and
they play on that
the movie is
throughout.
played with it. You know, it wants you to do that at the same time is continually giving you these reminders of how fucked up it is. Like one of my favorite little like 10-second throwaway things from like the newsreels was where they're like going to war with the bugs, is the scene with the little kids like jumping up and down on top of bugs.
Oh God, yes, it's so good. It's so good.
They also play on that throughout it with the constant references to Full Metal Jacket and during the drill sergeant scene, because you know, that movie is we talked about Full Metal Jacket on the stream. Like it's an explicitly anti-war or anti-Vietnam War specifically movie, but at the same time, those same lines are taken in this context and are thrown throughout like a very pro-war, pro-militarism. Like the movie you're supposed to be watching, that you know Verhoeven is parodying, but like you're still supposed to be watching a movie that's taken dead seriously, and it's a very similar movie in a lot of points to Full Metal Jacket. Like they have the scene where they run up to the cameras and they're like all like, "Yeah, we got to kill them." And
well, there's also like an explicit homage to Full Metal Jacket at the beginning
the drill
of
sergeant,
the boot camp scenes, saying, you know, like, "Do you think I'm funny?"
Yeah, no, it's the same, but like those lines are taken. Those lines are taken literally from Full Metal Jacket. Like it's making the point that, you know, the subversiveness of it, but it's making the other point too that, you know, this fascist society is able to fully just take the lines out of that movie, put them into a different context, and suddenly it's like a pro-fascist scene, like set of scenes, which is very prescient because we talked about this during Full Metal Jacket, like our stream on that, like you know, that movie was taken like a lot of people watched that movie and then joined the Marines during 9/11 because they were like, well, this is what it's going to be like, and I'm hyped to do that. So this movie is kind of making that point in the same sense that like happened in real life.
Also, like in Full Metal Jacket on our stream, I talked about how the like third or fourth time I watched it for the stream that we did, I realized one of the things that's so genius about Full Metal Jacket is that there's the boot camp scene, and you'd see all the brutality of life in the boot camp and how the boot camp is really dehumanizing these guys, obviously, to make them into these stone cold killers or whatever. And then the second half, it's like none of that matters. The U.S. still gets its ass kicked in Vietnam. So like we've had this transformation of this huge segment of our society adopting these martial values, et cetera, and yet it doesn't produce military victory for the American army. And the same is true in Starship Troopers. Like the things that they go through in boot camp are brutal. The scene where I don't know the actor's name, but the guy who kind of looks like Guile from Street Fighter with the blonde hair. You know what I'm talking about?
Ace.
Yeah. And when he's like, you know, I don't know why he says something like, I don't know why we need to learn how to throw a knife when we who needs a knife in a nuke fight? That's what he says.
And he demonstrates it by cutting his hand.
Exactly. So that kind of brutality, that kind of brutality is central to that whole process that they're doing, and obviously you see the way that the rest of the society is structured, this totally martialized like fascist society, and yet it doesn't matter. The bugs still kick their ass anyway. So you get this total deformation of society in these hyper reactionary directions, but it's not enough to produce military victory.
Well, the bugs are kind of, in some sense, I mean, not necessarily fascism, but like obedience taken to the extreme degree. Like the bugs have no personality of their own. It's a brain, and then the bugs kind of follow from that. You know what I mean? Like it's that extreme.
Well, and they've got that scene when they're still in high school. They're at the biology class doing the dissection, where they have the teacher who's this very creepy kind of like female Dr. Strangelove kind of figure. Saying that in some ways the bugs are superior to us, you know, because of these exact features that you're talking about.
I mean, I don't know. It's pretty like, yeah, like it's the bug is almost held up as like as what, you know, what this fascist society wants human beings to be. Like it's kind of like tough as nails, impossible to kill, completely obedient.
Yeah, no
terrifying,
no awareness of death.
Yeah, it leads you to ask, who is really the bug?
Oh man, death of motherhood. Who's the bug? You're man. This is
Yeah, this is deep Daniel today. This stream.
It's
Here,
Kafka-esque.
I was thinking we were going to go in the different direction of like, oh, but the bugs are Stalinism, and never mind.
I like it.
I don't know. I didn't have anything.
It sounds as good as the death of motherhood. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that seemed very like, yeah. I mean, that was a perfectly played thing when they do have the one little scene. So this is where, and also I forget the character's name, but Johnny's initial love interest who joins the fleet.
Denise Richards?
Yeah. What was her character?
Oh, Karen?
Carmen.
Yeah.
Carmen.
There we go.
Carmen.
And like a lot of times Carmen seemed to be there to be like the one person who did have like some kind of didn't really, affect her behavior much, but some sort of like vestigial human emotions, and like normal reactions to things. Like she, she's the one who pushes back just a little bit against the teacher at the very beginning. She throws up when they're dissecting the bugs. She's horrified, when she thinks that Johnny has, has been killed. And she seems to feel bad and like want to like patch things up a little bit with him. Whereas it seems like from the moment when he decides that he's going to stay in the infantry, it seems like he's just completely become this like much less human version of himself, which is sort of in the propaganda movie that we're supposed to be seeing is kind of portrayed as a good thing. And of course, Verhoeven's portrayed as very much not a good thing.
Yeah. But also everybody kind of has this different role. And as you can see from her, like her being a pilot, like she has to make decisions in a way that, somebody like Rico doesn't have to make decisions. Or, obviously Neil Patrick Harris's character is a complete sociopath. Like, you know what I mean? Like he literally is an SS officer. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like he's
and he starts out the movie like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But
in the initial thing where he's testing Johnny to see if he has psychic powers and he's showing off his own psychic powers, that thing that he does with like getting the
ferret.
Yeah, the ferret to go, crawl up his mom's leg and whatever. I mean, like it all seems very, it kind of seems like where he is at the end of the movie when he's wearing the SS uniform. Torturing the brain bug, is kind of where he starts the movie.
Yeah.
So is How I Met Your Mother the sequel to this?
But yeah, so each of these characters kind of has to bring different, like in a fascist society, like we like to think of it as kind of like a monoculture, but it isn't in the sense of like, all of these people have to provide a function. It's just that emotional quality or that, I guess, overly intellectual sociopathic quality or that blind obedience. They're all things that are utilized for the fascist society. Like so Carmen's constant like emotionality throughout the movie like is used for her to become a more successful pilot, and for her like piloting to like her fervor, I guess, comes from that place. You know what I mean? Like she's not necessarily like, oh, like let's kill them all. She is really into being like the pilot and like wanting to turn that into a career. So all of those traits are kind of used for the militarism of the society.
And that's a departure from the book. In the book, only men are infantry and only women are pilots. So that's a big change that he made by making it a co-ed infantry. I'm not sure exactly what he's trying to get, except that like everyone in society would be affected by this militarism. But that's a very big change from the book. which is
Verhoeven is very much referencing Nazi society and the idea that gender no longer exists. Like, sure, like, you know, motherhood has to exist and, like, you know what I mean, like things like that. But like throughout the shower scene, like nobody is really sexualized in it. Like, people are having sex, but they're still very sexless throughout the movie. Like, it's not sex inspiring them to do all of these things. So Verhoeven talks about this in that lecture that I was listening to. Like, gender no longer exists in this society at all. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a gender neutral society altogether.
That part would be very unlike the actual Nazis, but yeah, I mean, it is interesting that they have co-ed showers, and it's like not a big deal, and nobody seems to be, you know, like it's just whatever, you know, like everybody's in the same, you know, militaristic frat house together, and nobody's, you know, and nobody's seen it that way, you know, even though a couple of them, you know, do have that, you know, awesome implied 10-minute sex scene, you know, later in the movie.
Which was also sexless.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And ordered
also
by
made it
higher
that
up.
much more demented, like when she says as she's dying that it's okay because, you know, she got to have 10 minutes of sex with him once.
But like Michael Ironside's, like, he orders them to have sex, like, you know what I mean, like and I was listening to like the Chapo when they went on and they did the like lecture on it or whatever. Like they made this point too. Like Matt Chris has made this point. Like, he literally has to be ordered to have sex for that to like happen. Like, there's no spark of sex between them before that.
Yeah, the lieutenant says, "Don't pass up a bad thing." And then he was like, "Oh, okay." And then don't pass up a good thing. And then later on, you know, right, he tells him to take the extra 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that tells you something, you know, right there about like, which, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just like a way. I mean, in a way, it's almost like in 1984, where they have all of the, you know, the Winston Smith's girlfriend in 1984 is in the Junior Anti-Sex League, and, you know, and they have, but like it's sort of a way of, I think in context is sort of doing the same thing Orwell's doing in 1984. It's just kind of another way of saying how dehumanizing all of this is.
Mm-hmm. So, I agree with that.
And of course, they're also fearing the brain bug, which his face looks like a giant vagina. And then they also penetrated earlier in the movie. So, you know, it's...
Yeah, I missed that first one. I mean, I certainly caught it at the end of the movie.
Yeah, no, they have this, it's a brief scene. It's like during one of the propaganda reels. And they see this giant brain bug. And they get something. And then it just says censored across the street as you see like the guy shoving something in there.
Okay, yeah, that seems right. So yeah, I think that there's, yeah, I mean, certainly at the end of the movie, I mean, like that really seems like the place where, well, I mean, this was kind of said earlier, but, you know, like that was where they wanted, like Verhoeven really wanted to make sure there's no remaining chance of any possibility that you're not getting what it's doing here, because throughout most of the movie, like, even if you get the sort of dark satirical parts and you're enjoying those on their level, you are enjoying what's going on in like a visceral way. But in the last few minutes of the movie, he takes that away from you, right? Like he doesn't, you know, he doesn't want you to be able to continue to enjoy this on that level, because as soon as they like haul out like the brain bug and you know, like sort of, yeah, with all of the like straps around it and stuff, and, you know, they haul it out, and Neil Patrick Harris puts his hand on it and he says, it's, you know, it's afraid. Everybody yells, "Yay, fear!" You know, it's like, and then you see it in the propaganda reel that it's been that they're like it looks so vulnerable. They're torturing it at the end, you know, like he wants to make sure it's like, no, like, I want you to ride this tension for most of the movie, but at the end of the movie, I want you to only be uncomfortable with what you're seeing.
Yeah. Well, it's also like they don't understand anything about the bugs. And so when the bug feels fear, they're afraid of the bug. You know what I mean? Like they're very much afraid of the because it's not thinking like we think. So so when Neil Patrick Harris is like, oh, it's afraid, as if that's some huge victory. Like, yeah, like the bugs are as afraid of us as we are of them, which is where kind of this fascist, I mean, a lot of the fascism, like a lot of the way that, this constant conflict can exist is because people are afraid of the other. You know what I mean? Like constantly made to be afraid of the other.
And that's very, sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Briefly, that's very clearly a comment on, the American Empire, which is just making up these existential enemies, and probably also a conflict on the Cold War. I'm actually curious what Verhoeven's commentary was on the Cold War throughout it, because that's what historians now think, that Soviets weren't really an existential enemy, just like the bugs really aren't an existential enemy. You need them to provide a logic for the society. So I think that's very clear at the end. I think Forrest, you're right. It's just, that's basically text, not even subtext.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, I think that it's like what the old Noam Chomsky line about how the Soviet Union during the Cold War was a regional gangster and the America during the Cold War was a global gangster. That they could, were certainly ruthless about enforcing, their buffer zone, in Eastern Europe, but there really weren't the same kind of global ambitions, that the United States had. That seems totally right.
Well, it's the incomprehensibleness of it, and you can see this even more so now with our starting up a Cold War with China, because this has been a thing that we've kind of had with China for centuries. It's like this idea that somehow like the Soviets are backwards, not just in the way that their government works, but literally in the way they think. And the propaganda is constantly like, there's this incomprehensible way of thinking. That like, oh, somehow like Soviets are somehow like their minds work different than ours. And you've kind of seen that with China since like as long as we've had a relationship with China as a country. Like we've seen them as like almost like our opposites, like almost like the world is turned over and the Chinese are like the opposite of us, like the propaganda, I guess, like the yellow peril and things like that, like, so it's the same thing with the bugs, but because the bugs are literally not human. You know what I mean? Like they're insects. Like it's like we don't understand how their mind works. So to us, there's something to be terrified of. With in that kind of commentary, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. It also struck me as you were talking about that it is the interesting thing that in both RoboCop and Starship Troopers, you have the scenes where you sort of find out. I mean, obviously it's a much bigger plot point in Starship Troopers, but you sort of casually find out that like there's been some disaster from space that has led to some like massive massacre on Earth, that that like some like huge area of land has just been destroyed. Of course, in RoboCop, it was an accident, and in this case, allegedly, it was an attack. Although there is a really like, yeah, I mean, I think Ryan might be onto something there. Like, yeah, because
it's not. I mean, I remember watching that and just feeling very similar to like Colin Powell at the UN telling us that Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. It's like clearly they blasted this asteroid with plasma and sent it all the way to Earth, and that's why the asteroid hit Buenos Aires. We have to go to war now. Like,
yeah, no, which was like a surreal thing. Like I still remember like being in Grand Rapids and sitting around with some people watching that on the TV at Aquinas College, that because he was doing these things like
Aquinas College.
I did, yeah, for 2 years.
Wow. Thomas Aquinas, nice.
Yeah, and I went there for a year and a half.
School.
Oh.
Nice.
I drove by it sometimes.
but yes, it's actually weirdly something me and Mike have in common. We're both graduates of that college.
Sorry to interrupt.
I went there for a year and a half, but I didn't graduate.
You went there for a year and a half. You transferred.
Yeah, wisely.
Yeah, I went there for 2 years, but those were my last 2 years of college. So, so in any case, though, like he was doing these things, like at the UN speech, like he was reading off transcripts. We were actually talking about this last week. We did our stream for the 18th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq. The invasion of Iraq, now being old enough to serve in Iraq. God. like in that UN speech, he was doing things like reading off transcripts of intercepted Iraqi communications where people would be like, oh, the truck? Oh, you mean special truck? And that would be it. That'd be the whole thing. And he'd say, well, clearly when they say the special truck, they're talking about mobile chemical weapons labs. And I just remember watching it times like, how is that clear? Right? Like it really is the only thing special truck can possibly mean is mobile chemical weapons lab.
I remember watching that with my brother at the time too. We both had the same reaction. Like, what? How is this evidence?
Well, also throughout it, they're implying that there's more. I mean, Colin Powell is implying that this is only like the tip of the iceberg. Like, there's more. Like, there's almost like a whole bunch of evidence they can't release. Yeah. So it's like this is the evidence that really proves it for us.
Would you like to know more?
But the other thing, going back to kind of, I think Bessner said it earlier in the stream, is the fact that they can hurl their spores. Like, that's kind of made clear throughout the movie. Like, that's how they get from place to place. They like hurl their spores, which makes it an undeniable justification for nonstop expansion of an empire. The fact that they can literally hurl their spores anywhere in the universe, and then suddenly there's bugs at that planet, and then suddenly we need to do we need to have a war with that planet. We need to overthrow the bugs. Like, it's almost like there's it kind of is. It's the same thing as like the AUMF. You know what I mean? Like, somehow like the AUMF covers everywhere in the Middle East suddenly because there's jihadists here and here and here and here. And it's the same thing with the bugs. Like, suddenly the bugs they could be across the galaxy, and like that there could be resources there, and we have to go there to fight the bugs.
Well, if you remember the book, they're fighting multiple alien races for land and resources. So it's not just the bugs. There were the skinnies too.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I mean, in the book, actually, it's interesting because there's a line there's a line in the book where he, and this is actually very like I thought as I read it, of course that was certainly post 9/11, that like it was kind of eerie, because it seemed like just what was going on. That it said, oh, civilians make a big deal of the distinction between when we're at war and when we're not at war, but really there's hardly ever where the Federation isn't engaged in some sort of military operation somewhere.
Was the book written before or after 1984? Like the idea that like that.
Way after.
Oh no, 1984 Orwell after.
Yeah, because there's like the idea that like kind of that nonstop war is justified because
there's about 10 years between the two books.
Yeah. All right. Because I'm wondering like if the book kind of took inspiration from that fact that like in 1984 they're fighting multiple enemies and it's constantly justified like, oh, like now we're allied with one enemy and we have to fight the other enemy. Like,
yeah, in 1984, of course, what they were making fun of, what Orwell was riffing on was the Soviet Union and like the communist parties around the world having to have like the sudden changes of party line that because up until 1939 they were all about the struggle against fascism, and then in 39 Hitler makes the non-aggression pact with Stalin, and suddenly it has to be, well, the imperialists are trying to goad us into this destructive war, but Comrade Stalin's wise peace policy is avoiding this. And then, of course, in 1941, we're right back to the all-important, Popular Front struggle against fascism. And so that's what they're that Orwell's like riffing on in 1984 when he takes it up to 11 and has like scenes where there are Ingsoc as the ruling party in 1984, that, party speakers who are mid-sentence and somebody hands them a note saying that the alliances have shifted again and they're now allied to Eurasia to fight East Asia, or they're now allied to East Asia to fight Eurasia, and you have to switch the propaganda mid-sentence.
Yeah, which also kind of played itself out after 1984 was written with like the Sino-Soviet split and like other splits like that, where suddenly full countries would denounce their relationship to the USSR, and then all of a sudden it was like that we were always fighting that country and we were always engaged in those struggles because like the Sino-Soviet split, there was like the Albanian Soviet split, like all of those different like public denunciations of these different governments that they had they were allied with and broke away from them at different times.
No, which is actually a line in Christopher Hitchens' book about George Orwell, which I think came out in 2002. It was clearly written pre 9/11, but there's a line where he says that when he saw after Nixon and Kissinger had repeatedly threatened China with thermonuclear annihilation, that seeing Nixon embrace Mao, that he felt like he'd read the story before because he'd read 1984, and he goes into the always at war with Eurasia line. So
can I just before we move on, just because you mentioned Kissinger, Danny probably knows the answer to this question. Kissinger was really he was really pushing for tactical use of nuclear weapons on the battlefield in Vietnam, right? That was one of his things.
Depends what you mean by really pushing.
He wanted to use nuclear weapons.
In his 57 book, he says you should use it, and there's some gestures toward using it in the Nixon tapes.
Right.
Is Henry Kissinger about to drop a nuclear bomb on Vietnam? He didn't.
Right.
But yeah, I think that the anger is at like the moral. It's just immoral to even consider. And that's right. What I mean. I don't think there was any. Personally, I don't think there was any approaching of using nukes in Vietnam.
Right. Well, and Kissinger, for all his insanity, actually did hold back from those kind of things. But I bring it up because in this movie we get to see tactical use of nuclear weapons on the battlefield.
Which was also actually from the book. There was a lot of like, we have these small nuclear bombs we use because it was very, 1950s when we were, still testing nukes in Nevada, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and that was like a very common thing in the 1950s, like not just in science fiction, but in like sort of magazine, like kind of futurist speculation that everybody thought that like nuclear power was going to be used for like everything now, that we were going to like all be like this was a very common belief back then, even among policymakers, that like in not very many decades we were all going to be driving nuclear powered cars and things like that. So the idea of that like tiny battlefield tactical nuke very much fits into that.
There's also, I mean, the rationale for not using nukes, which is very good, is that we all have to live on this planet, and using nukes kind of renders large parts of this planet uninhabitable, on top of other, like, someone else sending nukes back at you when you send a nuke. If you've kind of conquered the entire world as like a one world government, though, and you're only fighting against like threats on other planets that you're not actually inhabiting at any point, and that you don't need resources for, like the use of tactical nukes suddenly is way more on the table, I'd say. If you see this as like an existential non-stop threat in the way that they are here.
Yeah, no, for sure. Not that I would necessarily put it past this government, Starship Troopers, to do that, even in a conflict on Earth. No,
definitely. They probably would, but I mean, it still opens up that possibility. Like if you're not living on the same planet as like these bugs and you nuke the bugs, like people are, the pushback against it, I guess, is not as virulent.
Well, I mean, Buenos Aires was not hit by a meteor; it was just nuked by the government, so we can go to war.
Yeah,
I'm a bug truther.
Yeah. Well, I think in this case, I think the more natural version of trutherism is just to say that there was a random asteroid, that like wasn't planned by anybody.
But the government knew, and they let it happen.
Exactly. They knew it was coming.
Okay,
they let it
it could
happen.
be a MyHop truther.
Yeah.
No, a MyHop truther. Let it happen on purpose, not the MyHop truther that made it happen on purpose. I remember our friend Noel used to point out about that, like that one of the most maddening things about all garbage was that like by the time we were having this conversation, like late 2000s, like it was totally a matter of public record that there was a real, no kidding, government conspiracy to lie about people to justify a war. But like, so it's like, yeah, instead of that, let's like obsess about this completely speculative, probably nonsensical claim about a government conspiracy to lie to justify a war. All right. So let's see. Ryan, good movie, bad movie?
Outstanding movie. On a very non-ironical level. It's great. Only good bug is a dead bug.
I don't trust Ryan when he's in space like that. I think he's propagandizing.
There's a whole planet of bugs right behind me. I'm going. That's where I'm heading after this.
You're not going to Zagama. You're not going to Zagama Beach. We didn't talk about that, by the way. The scene with the dad where he's like Zagama Beach, like.
Yeah, it was like the idea was like, no, don't go indulge these like Marshall fantasies. Go do like, permanent spring break on Zagama Beach or whatever.
You're going on vacation, young man.
Yeah. The
Which
parents
is
are great.
also from the
Don't
book.
party. Don't kill bugs. Don't party.
Yeah, it says something about the movie that, again, like one of the most brilliant things about this is that the whole thing is essentially a parody of a movie that never got made, which was the straight adaptation of Starship Troopers, the novel.
Apparently they're making some form of it. Like Verhoeven was talking about it in this lecture. They're making some form of like a serious adaptation of Starship Troopers.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about the father in the book, he starts off being, anti-war. His wife dies in Buenos Aires, and then he joins the infantry. And Johnny is his at the end of the book is like the LT in command of the unit his father's in.
Forrest, final thoughts.
I mean, I think it's great. I think it's a great satire. I watched it as a kid and remember the scene where they're dissecting the bug though and being like, what the fuck am I watching? Like not having any political but yeah, I think that I enjoyed it a lot. I watched it 3 times in 3 weeks because I kept thinking we were going to do this stream though.
So I want to add one thing. With all these Verhoeven movies we've been doing, I really want to do Showgirls now because I'll admit that's one where I totally missed the satire when it came out. I didn't know it was a Verhoeven movie, and now I really want to revisit it.
Well, when Micah and Daddy are back in 3 weeks, we could do Showgirls then.
Yeah.
I'd be down.
We might need at least one woman to discuss Showgirls.
That's probably a good idea. Yes, that is probably a good idea.
All right, fair enough. Well, Penn did that.
We'll get Jen on. It'll be good.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Fair enough. Daddy, final thoughts.
Great movie. Verhoeven is great. One of the best. One of the directors we'll be watching for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we certainly will on this channel. Andy?
Well, I kind of want to sneak the story in real quickly, but when I actually first saw Starship Troopers, I saw it in the theater. I think there was like one other person in the theater whenever I went to go see it, like opening weekend. And I went to the same mall where Rachel Maddow brags about buying the suit jacket that she wears on every episode of Rachel Maddow Show. So I don't know why I had to bring that up, but yeah, so like I can tell you, like, it wasn't a hit in the theater because people weren't there. It wasn't like whenever I went to go see the game and I was the only person there, but that's a whole other story. It's funny. We'll talk about that sometime. The movie itself, I liked. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think Verhoeven is fantastic. Really, from the opening satire to that Nazi movie, scene for scene to all the little things that he did. It's just an absolute marvelous movie. And it's a shame that nobody got it back in 1997 when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Micah?
I mean, of course it's a great movie. How did they let Verhoeven make this movie? That's what I don't understand. How did they give Verhoeven $100 million to make this fucking movie?
So he was asked that, and apparently the answer is that every 3 months at Sony, they were replacing the top executives. So nobody actually ever watched through the movie until right before it was like it was done being shot. And then once there was permanent executives in place, they postponed it. And they like, one comment they made was like, the very beginning when they show the flag, they're like, this is like a Nazi flag, and his response was, no, it's different colors.
Oh,
well, thank God that Verhoeven was able to, pull shit like that, to be able to pull this thing off, because, I mean, we don't get very many movies that are such blunt critiques of American empire as this one. Certainly that are mainstream Hollywood movies, certainly ones with a budget of $100 million, is not something that you see every day in the American film industry.
fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I enjoyed this a great deal for all the reasons that everybody said. It's been many years since the last time I saw it, and I certainly, like, I don't know, I probably listened to that Chapo thing. I've certainly heard about it in the years since then, and I had a pretty good idea of what I was coming into, but it was still it was still pretty amazing on multiple levels. So appreciate you guys. We'll be back here next Wednesday with about half of the people that you see right here, plus David Griscom, plus plus of course Cale Brooks to next Wednesday to talk about The Shining. So should be fun. It's also my birthday next Wednesday, so I reserve the right to be genially drunk and less coherent than usual. But,
How old? 28?
Yeah, 28. That's right.
If you want, I'll run through the plot so you can just kind of be commentary on it. Next week.
That sounds good.
Okay.
And if anybody who's thinking, oh shit, so I have to wait a whole week to see Ryan Lake, I'm not going to see Ryan Lake again until next Wednesday.
Not that you're really seeing me right now either, but still.
Let your mind be at rest. That's not the situation. You will see Ryan on Monday because he's going to be there along with Mark Warren and Gene Bajalan. For our long plan. Actually, we basically had this idea before this podcast existed. Sam Harris is wrong about everything episode on Monday. So
that's right. I've got to go reread his shitty Free Will book again before Monday.
And I gotta watch a bunch of Sam Harris clips this weekend and fucking try to get some clips for you guys to comment on.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, this is borderline abusive. Like how many stupid reactionary things I make Forrest watch to clip them for the show.
I'm turning into a fascist.
Well, I'm service guarantee citizenship.
I'm pivoting to doing I'm going to be the editor for the Eric Weinstein podcast, the IDW headquarters podcast.
This is part of the red brown pipeline or whatever they call it.
That's right. The well-known GTAA to FASH pipeline.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for watching with us. We'll see you. We'll have the Philosophy Friday stream in a couple of days. But until then, just remember, service guarantees citizenship, and the only good bug is a dead bug.